All right, so this next topic we're going to be going over is going to be over airspeeds. So for this one, we're going to be utilizing basically just this part of the whiz wheel. We're going to be mainly focusing on the pressure altitude here, the calibrated airspeed, the true airspeed, and then the indicated temperature, which is going to be on this range right here. Be very mindful of this line right here because we're going to be matching up this line compared to the temperature. All right, so now for this one, we're going to be going on page 92 if you're going to be following the book. For this first section, we're going to be going over questions 1, 2, and 3. So for these questions, these are the super basic ones to help you build up and then progress on to the harder ones, which in essence, they're really not that hard. So first we're going to be looking at the temperature because we don't need to worry about calibrated altitude and we don't need to worry about the altimeter. So here for number 1, we're given a temperature of 10 degrees. And because it doesn't have a minus before it, we can just assume that it's positive. So positive 10 degrees, the pressure altitude is going to be 10,000 and our calibrated airspeed is going to be 177. So for here, first we're going to be taking the 10,000 for the pressure altitude. So pressure altitude's right there. We're going to be taking 10,000, which is going to be right there, the 10,000 right there. And then we're going to be matching up with a calibrated airspeed of 177. So calibrated airspeed is going to be in this white area right here. And then in the blue area is where we're going to have our pressure altitude. So just like we've been doing before, we're just going to line up those two together. So 10,000 is going to go match up with 177. So 180 is right there. 170 is right there. So 172, 4, 6, and 7. That's going to be right in the middle right there. So now 10,000 for our pressure altitude is matched up with 177 for our calibrated airspeed. So now the question is asking us, what is the true airspeed? So now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to this section right here where it says true airspeed in knots. And now we have to look at the temperature. So in this question, the temperature is 10 degrees. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this line, this red line, and you're going to find where this line inside of here, you can see it just right there, that line is going to match up with positive 10 degrees. So this is 0 degrees, positive 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, and then 50 degrees is over here. So we're going to be looking for where this line matches up with this line inside. So just for visualization, you can see that as you get further and you start going faster, your true airspeed starts to go faster, this makes a much bigger difference. So going back, I'm just gonna match this up real quick. So 10,000 for pressure altitude matching up with 177. All right, so like I said, we're gonna line up rather, 10 degrees. We're gonna find where that line is right there, where this 10 degree line matches up with the line inside. I'm going to take the red line and then we're going to see in here where that lands. So right in between 200 and 210, right there I would say that's right about 208 or 209. So I'm going to put 209. So our true airspeed is 209. The correct answer in the book is 208, but that's close enough you'll be able to tell from the answers that are given since the test is multiple choice. All right, let's move on to number 2. So our pressure altitude is 9,000 and our calibrated airspeed is again 177. So we're going to be looking for 9,000 and we're going to match 9,000 up with 177. So 170, 172, 174, 176, and 177. All right, so now again, we're going to go over here. We're going to find where that 10-degree line matches up the Mach line there. Move the red line over until those two meet. And then we're going to come down, see what that looks like in between right there. So that's between 200 and 210, right about 205. So 205 knots for our true airspeed for number 2. That's going to be the same as the one that's the same as the correct answer in the book. All right, so number 3, we're going to be looking for a pressure altitude of 10,240. So you're not going to be able to get exact. So what you want to do is just try and get as close as you can. You'll be able to get 10,250 relatively close. So you're going to match up 10,240 matching up with a calibrated airspeed of 160. So 10,240. So that's going to be right there. So I would say that it's going to be right between the 10 and then that first tick mark. So matching up that right there with 160. So right past 10,000 for your pressure altitude, matching up with 160 for your calibrated airspeed. So now we're going to rotate it. Look for that 10 degrees again. Find where 10 degrees matches up with that Mach line. Then we're going to look down and see that looks to be right at 190. So our true airspeed is going to be 190 knots. All right, so for this next section, we're going to be going over questions 11, 14, and 15. So the only difference between this first section and this second section is that you are given a calibrated altitude and you have your altimeter setting. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the difference between our altimeter setting and a standard day, which is 29.92. We're going to find the difference between that, and we're either going to add or subtract from our calibrated altitude. So if your altimeter setting is higher than a standard day, you will subtract the difference from your calibrated altitude. And if your altimeter setting is lower than a standard day, you will add the difference to your calibrated altitude in order to get your pressure altitude. So we'll go over that on questions 14 and 15, because luckily for us, on question number 11, the altimeter setting is 29.92, which is equivalent to a standard day. So for this one, our calibrated altitude is also going to be the same as our pressure altitude. Our pressure altitude here is going to be 10,000. Now for this one, it's going to be exactly the same as that one up here. So for number 11, we have a pressure altitude of 10,000 and a calibrated airspeed of 177. So we're going to find that 10,000 for our pressure altitude and line it right up with 177 for our calibrated airspeed. Come over to this section, find where that 10 degree line matches up with the Mach line, come down, and right there that's 209 knots. So again, 209 knots. So we should get the exact same answer as question number 1 because all the information is the same. All right, so now we're going to move on to number 14. So this is where we need to figure out how far off we are from a standard day. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to take the altimeter setting, which is 30.12, and then we're going to subtract a standard day from that. So for this, the difference between 29.92 and 30.12 is 0.2. So now all you need to do is you need to add on an extra 0 to the end of it, and now you have 200. So you're always going to add a 0 to the end. So because our altimeter setting is higher, we're going to subtract the 200 from our calibrated altitude. So our calibrated altitude is 19,500. We're going to subtract 200 from that. So our pressure altitude is going to be 19,300. So we can go ahead and put 19,300 here. Now we can use this newfound pressure altitude and our calibrated airspeed to determine our true airspeed. So now you're not going to get perfect. You're not going to find these perfectly on the whiz wheel, but get as close as you can. So again, we're going to be looking for 19,300. So 19,000 is going to be right about right there. We're going to match that up as close as we can with 303 for our calibrated airspeed. All right, so now we're going to go over here, find -12, see where that -12 matches up with the Mach line. -12 is going to be right about there. And that looks to be, for our true airspeed, right at 396. So our true airspeed for here is going to be 396 knots. All right, so now number 15. Our altimeter setting is 29.98. So 29.98. So we're going to go ahead and subtract a standard day from that. It's going to be 0.06. So again, like I said before, we're going to go ahead and add a 0 onto the end. So it's going to be 60. So in this case, because it's, again, above a standard day, we're going to subtract that 60 from 6,000. So 6,000 minus 60 is going to be 5,940. So our pressure altitude is going to be 5,940. So now, just as before, we're going to take our pressure altitude, line it up with our calibrated airspeed to find our true airspeed. So 5,000 is right there. So just shy of 6,000. We're going to match that up with 126 for our calibrated. All right, so right there at just shy of 6,000 and 126. So as you can see, it's just shy of 6,000 for our pressure altitude, and then our calibrated airspeed is right at 126. So right there. So now we're going to rotate, try and find 14 where it matches up with the Mach line. Looks to be about right there. And I would say our true airspeed is going to be right at 140. All right, so for this question number 30, we have a calibrated altitude of 14,925. Our altimeter setting is 28.50. Temperature is going to be right at 0. But the difference is that we have a true airspeed instead of a calibrated airspeed. So now we're going to have to work backwards. So first and foremost, we're going to start off at our altimeter. So because our altimeter setting is lower, whatever the difference is between this and a standard day, we're actually going to add it to this calibrated altitude to get our pressure altitude. So we have 29.92, our given altimeter setting, and then we can get the result of that, which is going to be 1.42. So now, again, we're going to add that 0 onto there. So we're going to be adding 1,420 to the 14,925. So now we can go ahead and just add that down here. And the result is going to be 16,345. So our pressure altitude for number 30 is going to be 16,345. So now what we can do is we can take our true airspeed, and then we're going to be taking that, matching it up with our temperature. So we're going to be working backwards on this one. So our true airspeed, find that on the inner circle here. So right at 301, match that up with 0 degrees. So this one's going to be pretty easy. Just past 300, match it up with 0. You don't have to line up anything else because it's right at 0. It's going to be right centered. Now we're going to rotate. Now we're going to find 16,345 abouts for the pressure altitude. So we're going to find 16,000. 16,000 is right there. Just past that, that's right at, say, 16,250. A little past that is going to be right about there. So now we can go ahead and look, and that's going to be, I would say, 234. So 234 for our calibrated airspeed. So in the book, the correct answer is 233. This is close enough. You'll find the answer on the test. All right, so now for number 31. Same thing, we're going to start off by determining the difference between our altimeter setting and a standard day. So we're going to have 30.42, standard day 29.92. We're going to subtract that, and the difference between these two is actually just 0.5. So again, we're just going to go ahead and throw that extra 0 on there. So 500. So because our altimeter setting is higher than a standard day, the 500 that we got, we're going to subtract it from the calibrated altitude. So our calibrated altitude is 10,500 minus 500 gives us our pressure altitude of 10,000. So our pressure altitude is going to be 10,000. So now what we can do is we can take our true airspeed of 322 and match that up to the temperature of 5 degrees. So 322 is going to be right there. Match it up with 5 degrees. Right about there. And now we can go ahead and go over to our pressure altitude of 10,000 and see what our calibrated airspeed will be. So that's going to be right at 280. So we're going to have a calibrated airspeed of 280 knots. All right, so for this last section right here, we're going to be on page 93, going over questions 41 and 42. We have our altimeter setting, which is 28.95. So we need to go ahead and figure out how far we are from a standard day. So 29.92 minus 28.95 is going to be 0.97. We're going to add that 0 onto the end. That's going to be 970. So because our altimeter setting is lower than a standard day, we're going to add that 970 to our calibrated altitude. So 15,000 plus 970 is 15,970. So now we can go ahead, take our calibrated airspeed of 450 line that up with 15,970 for our pressure altitude, and we can determine our true airspeed. So we have our pressure altitude right there at just shy of 16. We're going to line that up with 450. All right about there. So now we're going to come over here and we're going to find our temperature, which is -20. So we're going to find -20, which is going to be this line right there, -10, -20. And we're going to find where it meets the Mach line right there. So bring our red line over, see where it lines up, right about there. So that's going to be right at, I would say, 518. So 518. So in the book, it says 520. 518 is close enough for the test. All right, so for the last one, we have our altimeter setting of 30.01. So 30.01 minus a standard day is going to be 0.09. So we're going to go ahead and add that 0 on there. So it's going to be 90. So because this is higher than a standard day, we're going to subtract that 90 from 14,500. So 14,500 minus 90 is going to be 14,410. So our pressure altitude is going to be 14,410. So we're going to take that pressure altitude with the 500 for our calibrated airspeed to find our true airspeed. So 14,000, match that up with 500. 14,400, match that up with 500. And then we're going to go over here, find 0. Pretty easy on that one. And it looks to be right after 570. So I would say 574 for that one. 574. So the correct answer in the book is 576. That's close enough. The test is all multiple choice, so you'll be able to determine the correct answer from the options that are given to you.